Hello and welcome back to another episode of Beyond the To-Do List. I'm your host, Erik Fisher. This is the show where I talk to the people behind the productivity. This week, I am thrilled to share with you an exciting conversation that I got to have with my friend, Mike Vardy. And those of you who listen to his show know that he is a productivity expert, however you want to air quote that or not, in his own right. In fact, he and I talked, for almost an hour prior to hitting record on this conversation, and we've already semi-booked the next time he will be on the show because he's got some projects he's working on that I'm really excited about sharing with you guys when they release later this year. But in the meantime, we've got a great episode here about frameworks, and this is one of those things where, yes, if you've heard Mike talk about setting up frameworks and time and all that kind of stuff, it's great. The key to this episode is really the fact that Mike got sick and was sick for quite a while, and he was able to use that as kind of a test case scenario, and I knew as soon as he was sick and kind of had posted about it online that I wanted to have him come talk about this frustrating fluctuation of your expectations, especially when it comes to yourself, because we all have lots to do. We all have more than enough things that we always have to get done and want to get done, but then the shifting has to happen, and we have to, to borrow a phrase from Rory Vaden, procrastinate on purpose in order to kick it into maintenance mode or even excel once we are then not sick anymore. This goes way beyond just being sick, though. There's a lot more to this. It has to do with shifting priorities, shifting goals, and honestly, just dealing with life when we have too many projects we've said yes to on our plate. So if any of that is exciting to you and you know that you need help with that, this is the conversation for you. And I'm just going to get out of the way and say welcome to this episode with Mike Vardy. This week, it's always my privilege. It's not even just this week, but every time that I get to talk to Mike Vardy, it's an amazing experience. We've had a whole conversation prior to me hitting record, and we just saw each other too. Like, what was it? It's right now as we're recording this, it's mid-April, and we just saw each other at the beginning of March. So about 6 weeks, maybe. Yeah,
but it's important to note that the midweek April, like the week of April 15th. Going forward, that is the week we should talk, because you just said this week, so it's got to be whatever week. I think this is what week 17 in the year. I think we have to talk from now
Only
on.
You would know it's week 17 in the year.
I think it's actually past that. I'm close though. I think, but anyway.
Well, you've had a lot of time to sit and think recently, and I've been kind of following along because you didn't get deathly ill, but you got sick.
By the way, dude, it's week 16. I can't believe I did that so close to the vet.
The fact that you knew off the top of your head, like within a 2-week margin, I was willing to give you and be like, no, you're right. You're good. So since we saw each other, though, it's been like 6-7 weeks now. And how many weeks of those weeks have you been sick?
So it's a good thing that I journal, because I can not only tell you when, but I can go to detail. I won't. I guess it got brutal. But March 11th, I kind of started to feel it. March 13th, I was full blown sick. And only this week, so we're talking April 17th, this week is the first week I actually feel like I've written, like, instead of just writing ramblings and ideas and kind of doing a lot of thinking, I actually did some physical writing. Like, I did all the fundamental stuff I need to do, including a couple of podcast interviews, which basically wiped me out for an entire Wednesday. But I did a workshop in Santa Barbara. So it's almost like my body said, okay, I'll give you this. Like, I went away for, I think, 3 days, but it set me back another little bit. So I would say that all in all, it's been pretty much, because when did we leave San Diego? So it basically,
so it was like the 3rd or 4th or something like that.
Yeah, so basically
March.
a week. Yeah, so basically a week after. So as soon as I finished decompressing from the 2 events that I did back to back.
Oh yeah, sure.
I was sick, and it didn't. Like I said, we're now basically 5 weeks after that. Kind of okay. Now I feel normal, or at least there's still some. A little bit of coughing here and there. And it's not like it's not going around, but man, it knocked me for a loop. And you saw, on my blog, there's a lot of like how to be productive when you're sick. Like there's a lot of those ones because, so a lot of low energy tasks, a lot of shallow work stuff got done over those weeks. So
well, yeah,
it is what it is.
And you had written about all that before. So how did it work out when the rubber met the road? Like you've pre-planned, you've been like, no, here's what, as a productivity expert here, and Here's how to do the thing I tell you to do when this happens. How did that live out in real life?
So I think the one thing that I probably didn't stress enough, and I'm going to stress that more in future writing, is when it happens over a prolonged period of time, right? So, I talk about, hey, if you're not feeling well, you should attach like this modality of energy to your task. So low energy tasks. So if you go to work and you're not feeling 100% or even close to that, you could say, I'm going to do mostly low energy tasks today, and you can quickly identify them, because making decisions when you're sick, let alone or healthy, let alone when you're sick, can be taxing enough. But I think the one thing when you're sick over a prolonged period of time is that you don't have that ability to just do low energy the entire time. Like, you do have to step up, because the world does not stop. So again, having those three absolutes that I talk about, which are, a lot like the three big rocks or the MITs or whatever. I mean, those things were really helpful. Theming my days, again, still super helpful, because I knew what I needed to do on those days. So if I didn't for example, I didn't do any other podcasting stuff on Wednesdays, which is my audio day, other than the interviews that I needed to do. And I did, anything to keep us at least a week ahead, if not two. Normally I like to be a month ahead. But, I had that buffer built in. So I think that the biggest thing for me was get the important before it becomes urgent out of the way, which is what I worked on. And when I say important, I don't mean like the heavy stuff that isn't going to be due until, May or June or July. I mean like the stuff that if it's going to be due in a couple of weeks. So let's focus on that. And then, anything that becomes urgent, take care of. But then the rest of the time, it was just all, as many tasks that I could do that were low energy. And there's a lot more tasks that I consider low energy that, you wouldn't think normally would be low energy, like things like checking email. That's a low energy task. Like, it's not a huge taxing thing for me to go through email, things like that. So it definitely helped. Journaling was a huge, that's one thing you could easily, even when you're sick, like a lot of my journal entries were like, there are pictures of me in day one that do not look flattering at all, but there's things like, a lot of when you're sick, and especially when you're an entrepreneur, I think, and you're writing, you're like neck deep in your passion or deeper. You're like, okay, well, let me think about these things. And because I just come back from some conferences, I had further time to decompress. So I started thinking about some of the lessons I learned from social media marketing world and some of the other events I've been to. And when I went to that workshop that I taught in Santa Barbara, I said, they knew I was not feeling well. I upped my game and would finish the day and then would just go back to the hotel room that we had there, and I would just, be done for the day, which kind of sucked because, Canada is snowy normally in March, snowy right now in some parts of Canada. We don't get snow where I live, but it's rainy and gray. It's kind of like Seattle in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
To go to Santa Barbara for 3 days and have to spend most of it, indoors was not fun for me. It was just like, but you like anything, I think when you're not feeling well and you're not 100%, the idea is to get by. And if you have that, like the framework that I and the philosophy, the methodology that I teach lets you have that framework in place, so you could either just get by and then ultimately get back to where you're ahead.
Right. Yeah. Well, and ideally before getting sick, you would be ahead. You would be maintaining a kind of a buffer, like you were saying. Right. You didn't want to just stay 1 week ahead. You wanted to stay like a month ahead, ideally. Right.
I think one of the other things that I learned when I was thinking about, we talked a little bit about this before we started recording, was I still have a propensity to do too much. I tend to and I think that any framework, you want to test to see how far it will bend and maybe where its breaking point is. Mm-hmm. And the breaking point is normally not the framework. If it's solid, it's normally the person implementing the framework. Yeah. So for me, it was like, I looked at because I wasn't doing, quote, a lot of stuff. I was more, I said, sitting with a lot of it. I looked and said, wow, like I have a lot of things that I'm trying to do. And what are the things I really could kind of, like, for example, I theme my months, right? So March was my relationship month, which was great for the first part of the month. But then the second part, I wanted to do like more socialization. So instead, I, just spent more time ironically, on Facebook, which is probably the worst month I could have done it, considering what's been going on with Facebook
Sure.
recently. But I mean, again, like anything, discretion. Whenever you put anything online, discretionary stuff. Believe me, I've had some teachable moments to my daughter from back when I was doing comedy. She's seen some images of me on Google. And yeah, you could Google Mike Vardy and find some interesting images of me when I was doing productivity parody.
I'm doing that right now. But
should totally, that should be the podcast image that goes with. But I think the other thing is that I looked at it and I said, because I had the theme month for April was video. I set that up and I was like, this is a good month for me to do it, because I've learned one of the big takeaways from social media marketing world was to focus more on video. And I haven't done a great job of that. But when March was going on and I'm feeling not too well, I said, well, I'm not going to make video my focus in April now, because I haven't been able to set the table. So all I did was I looked at my monthly theme for May, which was the podcast, and said, well, my podcast, I've already got recordings as of right now done till July. Like, I don't need to give an emphasis, like an overarching focus to the podcast in May. So all I did was I made May is now the month where I'm going to focus on video, which is actually probably better because I can do more outdoor stuff in Victoria in May as opposed to April. But then I made April. What was April going to be? Was April going to be the podcast? No, I didn't need. So I made it my month. I call it tightening. So that was my overarching theme for April, which is kind of like, if you're a student of David Allen's Getting Things Done, you might call it closing loops. For me, it's more about or streamlining. You might want to call it streamlining, but for me, it was more about I think
simplifying even.
Different. Which I already had. I had a month for that, but I think for me, the reason I used the term tightening was because I wanted to make sure that I clamped. I knew I wanted to close off what I left open, either by finishing it or at worst just backing out, which I don't like to do. And I actually haven't had to back out of anything, which is good. I've had to modify what my commitment was. But then secondly, think about, and we talked about this before too, like, how many conferences am I going to go to? What's my boundaries around that? So it's more about, I think simplifying is part of that tightening. But I think before I could, I think the idea of tightening it was just I probably could have called the month awareness too. Like, that could have been my focus as well.
Contemplation. I mean, by sickness, you were forced to have a contemplative, sitting down, slowing down mode. And so suddenly you're like, wait a second. Not only can I not do as much as I wanted to or thought I needed to, compulsory or not, but I need to assess not only how I can get back up to speed, but what speed do I want to be at?
Right. And because I start my year in September anyways, it's almost like March is a good, like March, April. It's kind of like I'm going into the final quarter of my year, or the final third of my year.
Sure.
So it's a good time for me to assess and go, okay, what have I kind of let get away from me a bit, and because every August is my planning month, right? Because September is when I start my year. And I may even move that to July. I've got the thing about theming and modal is you want to have options because, but you want to have a limited amount of options. Like, if you have too many options, and I talk about this a lot when again, having worked at Costco for years, one of the things that I learned from Costco is that, you're not going to buy everything at Costco. You're not going to go into Costco and say, I want to get this very specific ketchup for my my gourmet ketchup, unless you're going to buy like 3 bottles of it or a case of it, right? Like, you're probably only going to get Heinz ketchup, and you could either buy the big tin, the barbecue 3-pack, or the packets that you get at a fast food restaurant, or at a baseball stadium, like a softball game where they have like the little packets. Like, that's it. So those are your choices. And I think you want to have some element of choice, but you don't want to have so many that you walk out of there saying, well, I didn't pick anything because there was just so many things to do. It's funny. I was watching, my wife and I are thinking about getting a new mattress, right? Excuse me. And I want to get one of the ones online, by the way, you don't have a sponsor that's a mattress company for this episode, do you? Anyway, it doesn't matter.
I have in the past. I could recommend some, but anyways.
So I'm okay with testing out, like those online mattresses. Apparently you can go to some of the stores now and test them. And now everyone's making them. But, there was an episode of the show Life in Pieces that my wife and I watch. And there are so many similarities to that. It's why I've stopped watching Alex Inc., that podcasting show that just came out about Alex.
Yep.
Yeah, I can't watch it. It's too close to home. It's just like I don't watch TV if I'm going to watch a documentary, I'm going to watch a documentary. I'm not going to watch it.
See, I've watched 2 episodes so far. There's a third one waiting, and I'm kind of like, I don't know if I'm sold on the premise working as a TV show at this point either.
Well, and the thing
critically, but that's a whole other podcast conversation.
We get right, but my wife has said to me, she goes, "There's no way the wife would react the way she is because when you did this, yeah." Anyway, so the Show Life in Pieces, the matriarch and patriarch are going to mattress shopping, and it takes they finally settle on a mattress, and this is like a little vignette. So that show has like 4 vignettes in an episode, and by the time he gets to choosing the mattress, he says they're going to choose the one the first one they tried, and they said it's got a 30-year warranty, so therefore this will be the last mattress you ever buy. And the guy goes, "This is my deathbed then?" They say, "Oh, this is a whole other conversation now. I need to go back." And that's kind of what happens when we look at our task list or we look at our calendar or whatever. We see all the options. Is your brain? There's that element of your brain that just it wants to do it all, and it doesn't want to have any kind of regret or any kind of second guessing. So it just keeps guessing. It never leaves the first guessing phase. It doesn't want to have to second guess. Right. So when you've got like some kind of waypoint that you've put in advance, whether it's like, hey, this is my month. Okay, what am I going to work on today? Oh, it's audio day. Okay, great. Well, I've got all my podcasts done for the next few weeks. So now what do I do? Well, what's the monthly theme? Oh, it's tightening. Okay, well, let me look at all the things I could tighten, and are some of them audio tasks? But when I was sick, it was like, well, no, I have no voice, and I've done my audio work that needs to be done. So instead of me focusing on the audio elements, like the daily theme, I let the monthly theme kind of take hold and say, okay, well, what are all the tightening things that I can do? Oh, look, there's 83 of them. Okay, well, I feel like crap. So what are the low energy ones? Oh, there's only 14. Okay, let me look at that. And then I felt like I was being, quote, productive. I felt like I was actually doing the things I should be doing. And it wasn't because I thought of those things in spur of the moment. I had set it up in advance so that it made it easier for me to look at that, like versus having to filter through and look at all these different things, and that just being exhausted by the notion of just doing that. And my Fridays are my deep work day. I was doing the deep work I was doing was reading. Like that's all I could do, or listening. I re-upped on my Audible membership, and I'm actually listening to Donald Miller's book. What's the one, shoot, which one I'm talking.
I butcher it every time. It's 100 years and 1,000 miles, or 1,000 miles in 100 years. It's one of those combinations of 1,000 and 100 miles and years. So
yeah. So I mean, Michael Schechter reckoned,
and it's my favorite book of his.
1,000,000 miles in 1,000 years. 1,000,000 miles in 1,000 years.
Yeah.
So I got back into Audible because I could absorb it without actually having to, read, quote, with my eyes. So, I think that when you have these themes to rely on as kind of like more of these projects and goals, and then you have the modalities that kind of say, okay, well, where am I right now? Or who am I with? What can I talk to? Like when Ann and I sit down, I could say, hey, here. I mean, I started to add my kids as modalities because people, they're a resource-based mode, right? So I could say, hey, Colton, let's look at the things that we can do together. Like when you can start to put those things in place, initially, yes, it seems very robotic and maybe not very human. But the odd thing is when you do that, kind of like when you put any automation in place, you can humanize the parts that you really need to humanize, and that let the automation kind of take hold. And if it's a human-based automation, like something that you've put in place that's not reliant on, say, an outside API, right. Like that's not going to break. The only way it breaks is if you break. And that's the thing is I've always said focus on the app within, right? Well, I think frameworks foster freedom. I think you combine those and you put something like that together. When you are sick or when you're not feeling well, you put yourself in a much, much better position to be able to say, okay, now I can focus on the things that I can only do in this state. But the most important thing for me to focus on is to get better so I can get back in the game.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say there's that part of this as well, where it's you don't want to just get by. You almost want to say, well, what can I literally, to borrow the phrase from Rory Vaden, what can I procrastinate on purpose and get away with it right now in order to the highest priority, the priority right now is getting better.
Yeah. And I think that that the thing is when I say getting by, I like to use terms when I talk because most people don't think about it in that term. Like when people hear the term, like Rory stuff's great, procrastinate, but people when they still hear that, they're like, well, isn't procrastination bad? Which is not true at all. Not all procrastination is bad.
Well,
some is very good.
Think about it this way: the suffix on the very beginning.
Yes.
I'm a language nerd. The suffix on the very beginning is pro, which means positive. It means producing. So.
Yep, exactly. So just don't procrastinate, I think is the important thing.
Yes.
But no, I think that the big thing here too is that I think, and this is again, when you're so close to the material, you have to, like when I'm talking to people about theming their days, for example, like, and the first thing to say, theming my days, I can't do that. I work a 9-to-5 job. I don't have freedom. My kids, I try to use like a classic pattern break to kind of get them out of that state of mind because they have confirmation bias is showing up all the time with this kind of stuff because they're like, well, I can't do that because there's no way. And then I'll throw things that are like, well, okay, well, when do you do your laundry? Oh, well, I normally do it on like, let's say Saturday. I'll either get Saturday or Sunday. It just depends on, normally it depends on like what their, religious beliefs are, or, even their schedule. Okay. So Saturday you do laundry. What else do you Saturday? Well, do you do a lot of household work on Sunday? Yeah. I do, vacuuming and we mow the lawn and stuff like, do you go grocery shopping? Yeah. So like errands, right? Yeah. It's for the house. Yeah. So, cause you're buying groceries for the house. Yeah. And I go through this conversation, eventually gets to the point where I'm like, so what you're saying is like Saturday's kind of like a day where you do a lot of household stuff. Yeah. I would say that. So it's like your household day. Yeah. Oh, like, yeah, you're already doing some of this. You just haven't had anybody or yourself kind of say, oh, Saturday is my household day. Yeah. Because once you do that, like you said about what Rory talked about, procrastinating on purpose, now you have purpose. You're like, okay, this is being done on purpose. I am going to, which is why, if I'm not going to do audio work, like today as we're recording this, it's audio day. I probably still won't record too much audio today because I can still feel I cough I rarely cough during any recording. I'm like, okay, so I'm still needing to kind of take it easy. So I will do what I need to do. I won't be able to do necessarily everything I want to do because there's lots of things I want to do that are audio related. And then I'll move into, low energy tasks, or I'll move into some of these other areas too. But I think the thing is that when you have these in place, you could say, okay, Mike, when is the next time you're going to do audio? I can look and say, look, if I do just these audio things today, I don't need to do any other audio till the next theme day, which is next Wednesday. Whereas what most people do, if they don't get everything that they want or need to get done on a Wednesday, they'll go, well, I guess tomorrow or Friday. They just start arbitrarily putting it in places. Yeah. And then the next tomorrow never comes because there's no such thing as the next tomorrow. It's either tomorrow or tomorrow or tomorrow. So I think when you start to put in place, and again, I'm not saying that you have to put in themes for every single day, or you have to theme every month, or that you can only I just recently, and I wrote a blog post about this, about how when I was at Social Media Marketing World and I said video is going to be important, audio and video used to be on the same day. Well, I immediately recognized that there was no possible way that I'd be able to do good audio and good video on the same day. So I looked at my daily themes and said, which of these themes should I look at maybe eliminating so I could do video? Or does video need to be something I do every single day? Like, how do I want to approach this? And I did this, of course, on my planning day, which is Sunday. And I decided that one of the things that was suffering was Tuesdays, because Tuesdays was my administrative day. So I was basically doing the bulk of my admin work on Tuesday. But I also recognized that most of the admin work is like low-hanging fruit, shallow work. Mm-hmm. So Tuesday became a day of like putzing around. Like I wasn't really getting any major important stuff done. It was just a lot of like sitting in front of the computer, doing things that I wasn't doing much writing because I was spending so much time in admin. And I said, you know what? I need to do administrative work every day. Well, what other types of work do I need to do every day? Well, I should be writing every day. I'm a writer. Okay. Well, what other things do I need to do? Well, I need to be, I need to be thinking. I need to be journaling. I need to be meditating. And so then I decided, and I talk about this as well, these horizontal themes, which is instead of doing it daily, I do it, from a certain time block across as many days of the week as possible. And I have the freedom to do it all 7 days. So what I did was I took my administrative tasks, put them in a bucket called maintaining. So I have these 3 new horizontal themes called maintaining mode, which happens from 9 to 10 a.m. Saturday or Sunday through Saturday. I do making mode, which is from 2 to 4 p.m. from Sunday to Saturday. And the reason I chose 2 to 4 p.m. for that is because I'm a night owl and I'm much better at making things in the afternoon as opposed to first thing in the morning. And then in the evening from 10 to midnight, I have what's called musing mode, which is when I think, I journal, I do all meditate, and that happens from 10 p.m. to midnight. And then what happened with Tuesday is now Tuesday, the administrative tasks are falling into maintaining mode 7 days a week. So when do I do video? Tuesday is now my video day. So Monday, when I finish Monday, oddly enough, optimization day, I want to optimize my next day. So I set up my lighting and I get so when I show up Tuesday morning, everything's set up, ready to go. And I can record video in whatever ways, whatever my plan is. If I'm going to record how to use one of my planning sheets, then I might set up lighting one way. If I'm going to do talking heads, I could do it that way. That it sounds like, as I talk about this, like, wow, Mike, that took a lot of time. It did and it didn't. It took time over the time frame of using time crafting and understanding what it was to be able to say, okay, well, here's the framework and how can I manipulate it? But it didn't take much time once I just made the switch. Like now I wake up Tuesday morning and I don't say, what am I going to do today? I say, what video am I going to do today? And from 9 to 10 a.m., I don't make video. I do maintaining.
And we've moved out of kind of the whole being sick thing. We're kind of more into a day-to-day, more weekly kind of a
right. But I do think grid. But I do think that again, if I'm sick on a Tuesday and I can't do video, the goal is if you give an entire day, if your overarching focus for a day is video, then I can probably crank out more video in a day. And John Lee Dumas talks about this too, right? Like,
it's deep work.
You're getting into the depths of, on Friday is my deep work day. People go, what do you define as deep work? I'm like, writing, make any creation, reading, researching. So let's say I don't make enough videos on Tuesday, my default would be the following Tuesday. But if I say, you know what, next Tuesday already looks pretty full. What's Friday look like? Oh, the kids aren't out of school on Friday because this Friday they are actually. So that's why I use like deep work and optimization on Mondays and Fridays, because there is a chance the kids will be out of school and I'm not going to say, hey kids, keep it down. Right. But Tuesdays, they're never out of school. Tuesdays is the only time they're out of school is when summer arrives or during a holiday. But so Friday would be the other alternate day. So instead of me saying, well, when am I going to get that video done and going, oh, maybe Wednesday, maybe Thursday. No, it's either Tuesday or, oh, it can't wait that long. Okay, Friday. Right. So you're right. It is deep work, which is why when people say, well, why do you have a deep work day? It's almost like Fridays for me is like deep work triage. You know what I mean? Like it's almost like what deep work did I get done? I don't do meetings on that day. And this is another thing that happened when I was sick is I had to be okay with giving up some of my Fridays for things like coaching calls and meetings and stuff like that, because for a month I didn't have as many. So I actually canceled stuff like that. And I said, hey, why do we meet on this Friday? And I was and I call those abstractions. Like if you have a meeting that shows up on any day of the week that wouldn't normally be there, or that even, that steers you away from your daily theme or even your horizontal theme or whatever, when you come out of that meeting, you don't go, well, now what do I do? You go, okay, what day is it? Oh, it's Friday. Friday's deep work day. Okay, let's get back to deep work. So it's just, you can connect the dots much faster.
Yeah.
And I think that when you're sick, you need that. When you're healthy, you need that. But when you're sick, having that flexibility of that Friday of being no meeting day, and then being able to break that rule specifically because you knew that you were putting people, you don't want to have people, like if you're working with clients and you wouldn't normally meet with them on a Friday and you're sick for 2 weeks, you want to be able to say, hey, look, normally I don't meet on Fridays, but I've been sick for the past couple of weeks. So be very clear. Let's do this Friday. And I was very clear. Let's do this Friday. And they're like, oh, great. Thanks. They feel like, wow, okay, this person is really on the ball. Right. And so I think that there's that to consider too, because you want to have that flexibility. You want to have you want it to be simple, not necessarily easy. I'm not saying it's easy, but simple in that the answers are simple. And then what the execution is where it's going to be, the effort's going to take place, which is why I think willpower does really exist. And you and I have kind of talked about that a little bit as well, which is why Green Lantern is like everywhere in my office. So there's that element, right? Of okay. How do I, and then the other thing is there's that flexibility of like, okay, I'm going to lose an optimization day because the kids are out of school. But if if they aren't, and optimization is what I'm going to do for my business, but for my life, hey, let me look at my meal plans. Let me see if I'm eating properly. So you've got that ability to apply it to both personal and professional stuff. And then you've got the durability of knowing that because you've got enough things in that bucket that you're not like, I'm not going to run out of deep work to do. I'm not going to run out of audio. I mean, if I run out of audio work to do, then I look at the next thing, which would be, what's my monthly theme? Oh, it's tightening. Okay, well, what tightening can I do? So it's got that simplicity, flexibility, durability factor that you want, which allows you to kind of say, hey, I'm making the most of every single day, and I'm making every moment of my day matter more because I have a much the obstacles aren't in the I'm out of my own way. I'm getting the person in the moment, that person that just wants to sit down and, you know, check email and get the quick dopamine hit or jump on, like, that person is getting out of the way because, you know, Mike or Erik from, you know, 3 months, 2 weeks, a year ago said, no, this is not how we operate, because we don't want to just survive. We want to thrive. So yeah, I know you want to go and, like, I want to go see the Avengers movie on April 27th when it comes out, or whatever it is. It's on a deep work day. Therefore I need to make sure that I have all these other things in play. And one of the things we said was, like, the kids are like, can we go see it on a Saturday, which is the family day? And unfortunately, my wife and I are going to be away. Steve Dotto's getting married. I'm going to Steve Dotto's wedding. So for those of you who don't know who Steve Dotto is, maybe put a link to Steve's
on the show.
Yeah, there you go.
Remember, we used to do the three of us, the Blab
the
Talk.
Blab. Yeah, of course. Everyone here should know who Steve Dotto is. But anyway, so I had to make a change. We couldn't see it Saturday or Sunday, which is when we're going to be away. So I said, well, let's go see it Friday, which is my deep work day. So basically, when we go see it, and we're going to see it in the afternoon, I need to make sure I have all my deep work done by that day. Or maybe I do deep work every other day leading up to that. I skip that day of deep work, and I'm focused more on the tightening element. So you know what I mean? Like, I can already telegraph what I'm probably going to be doing, what I'm likely to be doing. And I think that there's real value there, but it's not something that happens overnight. It's something that you have to hone and foster, which is why I call it time crafting, right?
Yes. Well, and it really is, as much as you've just described it in detail, it really is still very simplistic in nature and has many benefits, because not only do you have these buckets that are weekly, but you've also got those maintaining buckets that you're consistently touching on stuff, you know, on a daily basis, to where then you've already predetermined that task, multiple tasks, really. Well,
yeah.
But at the right, you know, the right task at the right time.
The right time.
In the right amount.
Yeah. And the other thing, so for me, and because I'm very big on the body clock and understanding it, like, for me, that's when those make sense. And, you know, it's funny. I mean, you know, I have a background in improvisational comedy, right? I've always been a student of it, but I performed it for a long period of time. And there's friends of mine that talk about this as well. And I was listening to Alan Alda on the Chris Hardwick podcast. It was a really good episode. And he talks about, like, improv and communication and things like that. And I think that one of the things that he mentions is this idea of life is all about adapting, adjusting, and revising, right? And so I think that your life is improvisation in a lot of ways, but there's rules. Improv has rules. And if you've ever studied improv, you know that there, you know, if I was to say, hey, Erik, there's a ball of cheese rolling down the road there, and you said, no, there isn't, you've just killed the scene. Like,
it's
number
yes
one
and.
rule of,
it's yes,
yes,
and.
Exactly. And so I think that for me, when I put time crafting together, people are like, well, how do the horizontal themes work compared to the daily themes? And I'm like, they override the daily theme. So when on like today, during, you know, from 9 to 10 a.m., I'm going to be doing maintaining and maintenance work over the audio, because because remember, it's by time of day. And it's actually quite interesting because, you know, when you get down to the minutes, like the hours, that to me is, again, it's got a higher value point because it's during you're in the moment. So therefore it has a overriding effect over the daily theme. Once I get out of that, then the daily theme takes over again. And then I also have what are called weekly sprints, which is, hey, I want to complete a project from Sunday to Saturday, or if you're a Monday to Sunday person, that's fine. So that weekly sprint overrides the monthly theme. So if you're like Emily Wapnick's got the, you know, she's a multi-potentialite. She's coined that term. I think you know who Emily is too, right?
Sure.
Has she been? Yeah. So some people that are multi-potentialites won't do monthly theming at all. They'll do 52 weekly sprints because they want to hit 52 things. So that's fine, because then you can just say, okay, well, what's my daily theme? Oh, it's audio. Well, what's the weekly sprint? Oh, it's this. And here's the thing is I do both. So if like, I know for personally, I get to do this a little bit later this year because the weather's been crappy, but I want to do some gardening setup. And that's a weekly sprint. I need to spend a week focused on that so that I can have the garden ready for planting. And I think that's happening actually next week. So that will override the tightening of that monthly theme. And so I think that you want to have those rules in place so that you can really effectively know where the boundaries lie. And then you can know when to bend and when to break them. Because you've probably seen shows like Whose Line Is It Anyway, where it's improv games, right? There is a lot of bending of improv rules during. I mean, there's this thing called gagging and pimping, which are elements of improv where, you're doing things to get the joke, which is not. I mean, you want things to kind of flow naturally. You don't want to be. There's some people who they see the way a scene is playing out, and they've got this joke that they just want to get out. That's not really pure improv. Pure improv is you're reacting in the moment. You're not telegraphing. You're not pre-scripting. But if you're really good, you can bend the rules and then just go back into it. And it's like nothing ever happened. Nothing ever changed. So I think once you get really good at a framework of any sort, you could say, okay, well, we can get away with this. So I can get away with this a little bit here, which is why, again, when I was sick, I could say, you know what, I'm not going to do a hell of a lot for the next 4 weeks other than what I absolutely need to do. For me, that was getting by. For somebody else, that could be, okay, I'm just going to maintain or whatever it is. But the point is that you like you said, it is a framework should be simple because you should be able to quickly look at it and, you should be able to go, okay, I get this. Now, the implementation is where the human part comes in. And if you fail at the implementation and the system's solid, then we know it's user error as opposed to system error. If it's system error, then you can fix that. Like you could and that's what I've done, which is why journaling is so helpful, because then I can look back and go, okay, I know that this Tuesday was a video day. Let me look at my journal and see what I've done the past 3, 4, 5, 7, 12 Tuesdays and see why the videos weren't getting done.
Well, and that gets into, again, people like you and me, where we have we say yes to too many things, either that we think are great ideas, as somebody else has asked us to do or convinced us that is a good idea for us to do. And having this structure, framework, I'm going to go with framework because that's what you keep saying. And that's the right way to do it. By having this framework, we then have kind of a predetermined threshold, which is going to probably vary person to person. But by having the framework, we then have a better understanding and awareness of what our personal threshold is to how many of those projects, we'll just call them that, we can have on deck before they start to all, as we plan them out and put them in their maintaining mode or the other different modes or themes. We can see how far out we're getting to the point where we're overloaded and the process of even attempting deep work starts to become difficult.
Well, and I mean, one of the things I loved about when I worked for Costco is Jim Sinegal. Costco is a great company to work for. And I mean, I left it just because, I mean, I've been there for over 10 years when I left. But Jim Sinegal always said, we're a big corporation. We need to be nimble. So, I mean, when you go into a Costco, one week things will be in one place, and then the next week they'll be in another place. You'll be like, where did the bag of almonds go? Oh, we moved it over there. Why? Well, because that's where we were told to put it, or that's where we decided to put it, because you can just lift pallets and move them somewhere. Like with people have often said to me, like, oh, you plan your monthly themes. When do you plan? Oh, I plan them a year out. And do they stay there? No, they largely. But if I don't have anything there in the first place, then I'm already behind. I'm already behind, right?
Well, and you already illustrated the fact that they don't stay there because, again, the catalyst of this conversation was the whole talking about getting sick, and you illustrated that one of the more recent months, what was it? It was April was video, and now May is.
Yep. And the other thing is, when you think about it, like even email is a framework to a point, right? Like you said, you could focus on the people that you want. You could do that in email. Like, I mean, most people, they look at they're given something, which is what drives me nuts about a lot of productivity frameworks and apps, which is why I don't really talk about apps public, like on my blog as much anymore, because apps change, how people use them change. People tend to rely too much on the apps. They'll throw everything into an app like Todoist or OmniFocus or whatever and go, well, there, it's in there now. Like it should work. Like I should be. But the problem is if you don't have a framework going into it, then it's not, if you don't have an intention with it, then it doesn't matter if you've got something to help you pay attention to them. I mean, you could have this app that says, hey, don't forget to do this, do this, do this. But if you've made it all by due dates and you haven't really organized that, then you could be paying attention to the wrong intentions. And if you have these intentions, but you don't have a date attached to them or some kind of, again, like a theme for your day or month, then again, you have no way to pay attention to them. So these intentions are kind of powerless. Email would be a great example. Like most people, when they look at email, they look at the newest, like they'll keep they either store things in their inbox or whatever. It doesn't matter how you do this. But the bottom line is when you're looking at email, most people, and it's the way the programs are generally designed, is the newest email is the one you see first. Why? Why wouldn't you see the oldest one first? You want to deal with the thing that came earlier, not that came most recently. In most cases, right? Like is the things that age. So there are like if you're using Gmail or any third party mail app, Outlook, it doesn't matter. You can look at, hey, I want to look at it from oldest to newest, or I want to look at it from who the person was that sent it. Because if it's my boss, that person is very email driven. I want to deal with those right away to get that out of the way. And then I'm going to move on to the next group of people, depending on what it is. I want to look at it by, there's certain filters that you can put in place. Gmail has the important filter. Like I want to look at all the important emails. Like you can look at things in a segmented way, and you should look at them in a segmented way. But what most people do is they look at the default. And they say, oh, this is the most recent email. I should look at that and deal with it first. No, that would never make sense. Like you would not buy if you've got a quarter of a carton of milk left and you say, well, we're going to run out of milk, so I'll buy another carton. You wouldn't go, oh, look, new carton of milk, and leave that quarter carton of milk to rot in your fridge. But that's what we do with things like email or tasks or whatever. You want to put a framework in place where it's almost like first in, first out, but you get to decide what that means. Does that mean by date? Does that mean by person? Does that mean by priority? What does that mean? You have more freedom to make that choice. And all time crafting does, and any other if you use any other time management framework in a way that makes it work for you, then you have that capability, but you've got to, it's not just to set it and forget it. You've got to hone it. You've got to nurture it. You've got to spend time with it, because if you don't, then it's going to get away from you. And there's that quote by Lao Tzu that I love, which is saying, time is a man-made construct. Saying I don't have time is like saying I don't want to. And that's what happens is a lot of people say, I don't have time. Well, you do. The interesting thing is, and you would agree, I know you'd agree with me, that sometimes in order to be more productive and to be more efficient, you need to slow down. You need to say, okay, hold on a second. Let me catch my breath and really assess the situation, which sounds completely counterintuitive because most people think of productivity as getting as much done as possible in the least amount of time. That's not it at all. I don't even think productivity is about efficiency and effectiveness at first blush anymore. It's about what's my intention? How am I going to pay attention to it? Then as you make that happen, then you're going to get faster at it and you're going to get more effective at it. But productivity on its face is just not about like, hey, how can I do things faster or how can I do things better? It's about how do I put something in place that allows me to do something, that allows me to take what I really need and want to do, pay attention to it so that I can do it better and faster.
That's a great place to stop. And I do love that quote, by the way. I also know that you're going to be back later this year. You've got a lot of exciting things coming. So I don't know how much of any of that you want to tee up other than just have people, go to what you're doing right now in the meantime. But feel free to pimp yourself out.
Yeah. So if you go to productivityist.com/ I'll put productivityist.com/Erik. You can learn a little bit more about what's going on too. I mean, I'm in the middle of it's been 10 years of, kind of being focused on productivity, either as a parodist or now as the thing I was parodying, which is a whole other story. But I'm excited because I call November Nowvember. So November is going to be a big month for us at Productivityist, and it's going to be a big month for time crafting. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm really it's 2018 has been a phenomenal year, and for me, it'll be I start my year in September, so I'll be in the throes of my next year when things really when there's going to be a lot of stuff. I'm excited, and so go to productivityist.com/Erik, and you can learn more about that. And I'll even have a free goodie there for you too. Don't know what that goodie is yet, but it'll be there.
Nice. Well, and November again. That's you and I are going to see each other a couple days right before that at Jeff Goins' Tribe Conference. We both were there this past year. We're both planning, already set to go again this year. In fact, you and I. Probably what we should do is just sit down face to face and record a conversation there.
Yeah, by that time, by that time, based on the fact that video is my focus in May, I may actually have a video plan in place by then. So maybe we'll do a video conversation. We'll get a nice little place. We'll Michael Hyatt it up. We'll Michael Hyatt it up. Have some nice cushions and stuff like that. Yeah, it's. I'm looking. Nashville is such a cool city too. And the thing is, I didn't even get to go downtown last time.
Oh,
I spent most of my time commuting from East Nashville to Franklin. So I have to decide.
Franklin's not bad, but I mean, you got to go to the city proper too.
Right. So I think what I'm going to do this year is, and I'm gotten much better at this. We were talking about this before. Is I'm going to, get a place in Franklin and then probably rent. I mean, there's very few places in the United States when I come from Canada that I need to rent a car. Like when I go to New York, no. San Francisco, no. Like even San Diego, I don't even. But when I'm in Southern California, Atlanta, or in Nashville, those places, I'm like, yeah, I need a car. Like because it's just the way the city is designed. If you're outside of the city proper, there's no transit getting you there, and the Lyfts and Ubers become, you do the math and you're like, oh, well, I could have rented a car and had it way, and my budget would have been, remember, as I said, I've got to make my dollar stretch 30% further as a Canadian. So there you go. But no, I'm excited. I love Jeff's conference. And if you get a chance to go, you should. You're gonna put a link. You should put a link to Jeff's thing.
I totally will. I think they had an affiliate thing, but even if they didn't, I'll put the links in the show notes for this episode of all the stuff that we mentioned and talked about and everything. And again, I'm really looking forward to seeing you again. I mean, and we'll talk before then, but
of course,
I'm looking forward to recording again that other people will be able to get in on, because you gave me a really big heads up on all of it prior to hitting record, and you just got some amazing stuff coming down the line. So can't wait.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate it. I mean, let's make sure that the 17th week or the 16th week of every year now we get together, because that's the best time for us to talk. Apparently.
Yeah, that's our sprint. That's our theme.
That's our weekly sprint. Erik, this has been great. Thanks so much for having me on the show. It's always fun to talk to you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for being here. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Mike Vardy. I know that I always have fun talking with him, especially when I get to see him in person. I really hope that you have figured out or been moved more forward to creating a framework that works for you, that will support you like a framework should when things start to fall apart, or when you've said yes to too many things, too many projects, too many expectations on your plate to be able to either say yes to them, push them back a bit, reprioritize. I know I am not the only one who's been in this position, neither is Mike. So if you're aware of somebody else who needs to hear this conversation because it fits them to a T, go to the show notes at beyondthetodolist.com/220 and share this episode with somebody you know needs to hear it. And with that, I want to say thank you for listening, and I'll see you next episode.